You have been preparing for McKinsey PEI. You know the 4 dimensions. You have studied them. You have practiced your stories. You feel ready. But here is one example I've seen happen over and over with candidates. You walk in, the interview asks you about leadership. You tell your story, you think you nailed it. Then the interviewer asks a follow-up. You answer, still solid. Third follow-up, hits. And suddenly you freeze. You don't have that detail. You didn't visualize the moment. So you're scrambling. The interviewer feels it. They know you have not reflected. And that's when you realize preparing on paper isn't the same as living it. I've seen this example happen with dozens of candidates. And I'm going to show you the 5 common mistakes that cost them McKinsey offers, and more importantly, how to fix them. If you're new here, I'm Robin. On this channel, I share my unfiltered advice on how to break into elite consulting firms. Let's dive in. We're going to go through 5 specific mistakes, one after the other, and with each one, I'll show you exactly what went wrong and how to fix it. Mistake number 1, and this is probably the most common one I see. So here I want to lift the story from an experience where I worked with an engineer who was trying to break into McKinsey. Smart guy, really impressive background, no doubt about it. But when the interviewer asked him about a time he demonstrated drive, taking initiatives, here is how he told his story. So I was working for this SaaS company and I noticed there was a feature gap that some of our customers were asking for. So I started building an MVP to validate the idea with the customers. I spent a few weeks on that after work, tested it with some user, and they gave positive feedback. So then I realized, okay, this could actually work at scale, but to take it to production, I needed resources. So I went to my manager and pitched the idea. He said it was interesting, but we needed to talk to the lead of business development first because it involved resources, meaning money. So I scheduled a meeting with them. I presented the proposal. I showed them the MVP, the user feedback, the market opportunity, but they had concern about the ROI timeline. So I went back and did more analysis. I looked at the comparable products, built a financial model, showed them how this could break even in 6 months. Then I presented that to them again. They said they had some hesitation, but eventually they approved $500,000 budget. So then I led the engineering work to take the MVP to production. We shipped it, and after 6 months, it broke even, and now it's generating millions revenue annually. Do you hear what happened? He turned his story into a chronological dump. It's like he's walking the interviewer through a timeline instead of telling them what he actually did and why it mattered. Here's the problem. The interviewer couldn't figure out what the actual problem was. What was the specific contribution of this person? What made him different from anyone else on that team? It was all buried in the noise. So how do we fix this? The fix is simple. Use the STAR framework: situation, task, action, result. Instead of walking through every step chronologically, you structure it like this. I identified a feature gap in the SaaS platform that some of our customers were asking for, but the company had totally missed it. So to bring this to attention of management, I needed to gather some initial customer proof based on an MVP with a limited set of users. So I built the initial business case and secured budget to take it from MVP to a production-ready feature. I validated the concept with a minimum viable product partly built by working after work, by testing it with a few users. Then I analyzed the data, identify why the company missed it. It was X and Y, and why the company was hesitant about my initial budget request. It was the risk. So I structured my pitch around risk mitigation, not just ROI. I presented that to leadership and it shifted the conversation. That's how I convinced them to approve the $500,000 investment. We broke even in less than 6 months. That feature is now one of our top revenue drivers, generating millions annually. See the difference? Now the interviewer understands what he did. The contribution is clear. The impact is undeniable. But here's the thing. Even if you structure your story perfectly with a star, there is another mistake that can still sink you, and it's subtle. Mistake number 2, and this one is catastrophic if you don't catch it. You've got your star framework down. Your story is a structure, but then you start telling it, and here's what happens. So I was working on this project. The team didn't have a clear strategy. My manager wasn't aligned with my vision, so I had to work around them. Do you hear what you're doing? You're blaming the team. And the interviewer hears that as, I'm not a leader, I'm a victim of circumstances. That's a red flag. McKinsey doesn't want people who blame. They want people who own. Here is what I tell my clients. You are the protagonist in this story. Everyone else is context. Your manager, your team, your problems and obstacles. They all are context. But you are the one making decisions. You are the one solving the problem. You are the one driving the outcome. So instead of saying, my manager rejected my proposal, you say, I analyzed the data, which led me to a proposal. My manager had concerns, so I addressed those concerns one by one, and eventually I got buy-in. See, you're the active agent here, not the victim. Now, you might think, okay, I got the star. I own my story. I'm good to go, right? Not quite, because there is another layer to this. Mistake number 3. This is where a lot of people get tripped up. So in this context, I'm bringing an example from a client I was working. She's prepared her story. She's using a star. She got ownership on the entire story. I asked her to walk me through her stories. She does. Sounds good. Framework solid. Now, I start asking follow-ups the way the interviewer will. First follow-up. So when you said that to your colleague, how did they react? She answers, good, specific, I can see it. Second follow-up, why did you make that decision instead of another approach? She answered again, still solid. She's got a reason. She thought it through. Third follow-ups, when they push back on that, what exactly did you say to them? And suddenly she freezes. She can't answer, or she gives some vague response, if I remember correctly. Well, I explained my reasoning. It pops in my mind that maybe this story isn't real to her. It's a framework she memorized, not an experience she lived, or she took action without having a logic behind. Here's the thing about McKinsey interviews. The interviewer isn't interrogating you. They're helping you. They're asking follow-up questions to tease out your actual impact and contribution, to understand the gravity of what you did. And sometimes that reveals other uninvited elements. You might get anywhere from 3 to 7 or 8 follow-up in some cases. And each one is designed to help you reveal the depths of your story. The fix is simple, but it takes work. You need to visualize your stories and past experience and reflect on those. Think about it. You're not going to sound crazy. Think why you did what you did. And if you want to make a tiny part of it, you need to see those moments in your head as if you lived them. What was the situation in that moment? Why did you and others end up in that situation? What were others thinking? What were you thinking? What did you do? Why did you do it? Did it pan out correctly? What was the result? Once you have that sensory details in your mind, you're not just remembering details. You're just remembering what actually happened. Which brings me to something important I want to share with you right now. Look, I've shared 3 mistakes so far. And I know if you are watching this, you're probably thinking your own stories. Maybe you're recognizing some of these patterns as well. Maybe you're wondering, wait, is my story falling apart too? Here is what I found. Most people can see their own blind spots. You think your story solid, but when someone else listens, someone who knows what McKinsey is looking for, they catch things you missed. That's why I offer one-on-one sessions. It's 45-minute session that can be dedicated entirely to your PEI. We go through your stories. I ask you the follow-up questions, the kind interviewer will actually ask. And together, we figure out exactly where your story are strong and where they need work. If you want to do that, link, as always, is in the description. We can audit your PEI together and get clear on what to fix. Now, there are 2 more mistakes I want to walk you through, and they're just as important. Mistake number 4. McKinsey tests 4 dimensions now: connection, drive, leadership, and growth. And here is what I see happen. Usually candidate prepares 1, 2, 3 killer stories. Really impressive. They think, okay, I can adapt this to whatever they ask. No, that doesn't work. Here is a story based on the work I did with several clients. I worked with several engineers trying to break into McKinsey, and none of them had formal leadership titles. So they panicked when I asked them, what's your leadership story? They said, I've never been a leader. I can't answer that. Okay, think about a moment, any moment where you acted like a leader, where you took responsibility, where you influence others towards a goal, where you help your team achieve something even without the title. And suddenly they remember. They took responsibility for 3 people on a project. They guided a decision. They pushed back on something that wasn't working. That's leadership. And here is the problem. If you prepare a drive story about taking initiatives and pushing things forward, and the interviewer asks for connection, and you try to force that drive story into a connection answer, the interviewer stops you. They ask for a different story, and now you're scrambling. So you need multiple stories. You need at least 2 per dimension. That's 8 stories in total. And each one needs to be genuinely in line with that dimension, which leads me to the final mistake. Mistake number 5. And honestly, this one might be the most important one. You've got your STAR framework, you own your stories, you have visualized it, you've got the right story for the dimension, everything apparently is in place. But then you tell it and it sounds robotic, like you memorized it. Here is another story. I was coaching an athlete. Guy competed at the national level in hockey in Sweden, won a junior championship. Incredible story about resilience and performing under pressure. Real story, real stakes. But when I asked him to tell it, here's what I got. So it was hard. I tried to do this. The coach told me to do that. I was training hard, and the result was that we won the championship. Basically, don't be like Holland in a post-match interview. You know, the guy who answered in just one word and looks like he'd rather be anywhere else.
Tonight, you became the youngest player in UEFA Champions League history to score a first-half hat-trick. How are you feeling right now?
I feel very good.
That's what this sounds like. It might be technically correct. You're following everything, but this way, it has 0 energy, 0 life. And as I said, that might be technically correct, but it sounds like you memorized it. It doesn't sound like you lived it. So here is what we did together with this individual. I asked him to close his eyes and visualize that moment. Not the whole story, just one moment. The second period of the final game. His team was down by 1. 5 minutes left. The arena was loud. His legs were exhausted. And in that moment, he made a decision. Not the safe play, the right play that he had practiced all along. So he took a risk and he made it work. When he could see it and feel it, suddenly something shifted. He wasn't reciting anymore, he was remembering. Here's the thing about PEI. The STAR framework or any other framework is just scaffolding. Once you got the structure, you forget about the framework. You just tell the story naturally. Like you're talking to a friend over coffee. You say it conversationally. You pause when you're thinking. You let emotion come through. You sound like a human, not a robot. And here is something that helped a lot of my clients. Practice with peers, and recently a few with AI. Use Claude or ChatGPT. Tell AI your story. I would ask you follow-ups. The tough one, get your scaffolding right, tease out the details, practice answering the questions. But here is what AI can't do. It can't hear the emotion in your voice. It can't see your facial expression. It can't feel whether you're present in that moment or you just reciting words. AI doesn't understand tonality. It doesn't understand that when you're telling about a moment where you were scared, your voice should shift. When you made the decision you were proud of, it should came through in how you carry yourself, the way you use your facial muscle, your body language. That's half the storytelling. And that's where a coach comes in. That's what I focus on with my clients. You can work on the structure with AI, of course, if you want, but then we work on that delivery, the emotion, the presence, the authenticity that an AI tool just can't assess. Maybe AI will get there someday, but not right now. Those human elements, the ones that actually make a story land, that's what separates a candidate who freezes in the real interview from the one who crushes it. Because if you sound inauthentic, the interviewer feels it, and it costs you. Fixing these common mistakes isn't just about getting one question right. It's about building a complete PI that works across all 4 dimensions. And that takes work. It takes practice. It takes feedback from someone who knows what McKinsey is looking for. But if you're serious about breaking into McKinsey or other elite consulting firms, I run cohort programs with limited individuals. We work together on everything across the entire recruitment process, how to get referrals and get into the recruitment process, cracking the digital aptitude test, acing the PI interview, case interview, and landing offers. And here is what I promise. If you're serious and get into the cohort and you don't get an offer, I'll pay you back. Full refund. Money back guarantee. I'm confident in what I do, and I've seen it work over and over. If you're interested, the link to the cohort is in the description below. But first, let me give you something else. So here is what we cover. 5 mistakes that cost candidates McKinsey offer. But here is the real insight. The thing I want you to take away from this video. Most candidates prepare their PEI like it's a test to pass. They memorize the framework, they write down their stories, they practice it in front of mirror, but that's backward. The PEI isn't a test, it's a conversation. And conversation can't be scripted. They can only be lived. The candidates who crush the PEI are the ones who stop trying to be perfect and start being real. They visualize their stories so deeply that when the interviewer asks a follow-up, they're not searching their memory for the right answer. They're just remembering what actually happened. That's the difference between an offer and a rejection. Now, the PEI is important, but it's not the whole picture. You also need to absolutely dominate case interview. In the next video, I'm going to break down the McKinsey case interview and how to think like a McKinsey actually wants you to think. Click here to dive right into it.